On our travels, we made our way into historic Pensacola, and in historic Pensacola are more museums, namely Museum of History. In front of the Museum of History, we have an old locomotive, and a flat car, and a caboose. These are always cool to look at. I like trains. Guess it's the little kitty in me. But we're about to go inside this place, so as usual, stand by. McHugh Warehouse, New Orleans Grocery Company, 1903, Museum of Industry. Cobb Warehouse, 1884. Huh. Well, let's see what we got inside. Little wagon right here. Built in 1877 for the Pensacola Ice Company. Housed the New Orleans Grocery Company, Levi Hallmark Company, and Pensacola Alert and Company, using this as a warehouse. Obviously, the industry in Pensacola would be centered around the sea. Starting in 1785, they have two people here, William Penn and John Leslie, develop a business trading British goods with Native Americans. Florida becomes a territory in 1821. In 25, Pensacola is a Navy Yard site. In 1826, Captain William Chase is assigned to construct some forts. 1834, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia Railroad begins. 1837, financial panic causes railroad company to fail. Alabama lawmakers unsuccessfully try to merge North Florida into Alabama, but in 1845, Florida becomes a state. 51, timber starts leaving the state. Well, not the state, but Pensacola. Remember those live oaks that are good for shipbuilding. Then the Abercrombie Brick Manufacturing Company is formed in 54. Alabama and Florida Railroad starts in 1860. And in 1862, Confederates destroy everything when they leave Pensacola. Fast forward to 69, fish is getting shipped out of Pensacola. Then Sewell Cobb begins shipping local fish commercially in 71. And the railroad is also rebuilt. Railroads connect Pensacola with northern cities a year later. Continental Hotel opens in 75. Warren Fish Company in 80. E.E. Saunders Fish Fleet established in 82. Dummy Line Railroad links City and Navy Yard, 1890. Lewis and Nashville Railroad builds a street wharf in 95. 96, L&N Railroad builds port office and docks. The Navy's Atlantic Squadron does exercises in 1903. Captain Willis Barrow and the steamship Tarpon begin weekly passenger and freight service. Hurricane wipes out Pensacola in 1906. Well, heavily damaged. 1916, another hurricane. 1926, another hurricane. Then in 31, bridges across Pensacola Bay and to Pensacola Beach open. 58, a fire destroys the former L&N docks. Then 4-lane bridge opens over Pensacola Bay in 1960. L&N and Chessie Railroads merge, forming CSX in 80. And 1983, we start building hotels. Namely, 15-story Hilton Hotel, and restoration of L&N Passenger Depot. That ship Tarpon that I previously mentioned, like I stated, it made different trips, but unfortunately in 1937, The heavily loaded ship sank in a storm near Panama City. 18 people, including the captain, died. Brick making is one of the industries from Pensacola, as we see from this exhibit. I'm not going to say it's a simple process, but basically dig up clay and process it, mold it into bricks, dry it in kilns. A rough and dirty trade. Yeah, dig the clay up. Iron content determines the color of the finished brick clay. High iron makes a dark red brick. Lower iron produces lighter colored bricks. But yeah, mold bricks, dry them. As we could see right here, we have a model of a rail cart right here for drying the bricks in the kilns. Apparently, most of the brick that was made way back then was used by the government, obviously in the building of forts and other military setups. A lot of bricks. 16 million bricks in this case right here. A lot of bricks. Obviously, fishing was a large industry in Pensacola, with a lot of people coming from up north down here in the winter time. And obviously, they caught all kinds of stuff: shrimp, sea trout, red snapper, oyster, mullet, mackerel, grouper, dolphin fish, bluefish. Got our exhibit here showing a twin-masted schooner right here. Fishing was just a simple matter of casting nets in the right areas. Well, I wouldn't say it's simple, but I mean basic concept. Throw your nets and hope to get a large hit of fish. Sure, there's way more to it than that. Got some implements right here that would have been used by the fishermen. Up until the 1920s, deep-sea fishing boats were all sail. Most red snapper was caught off the Campeche banks, about 450 miles from Pensacola. Interesting. Workers went from sun up to sundown, standing watch, fixing sails and lines, hauling fishing lines in. Most of them slept under blankets. Crews fished for about 3 weeks at a time. A day's catch averaged around 2,500 pounds. Wages were obviously based on shares. If you were profitable, if you were successful at fishing, you got paid well. If the expenses exceeded the profits, it was a bust, and, well, you at least got to go home with a large fish to feed your family. Through these doors, we're going to look at the locomotive that we first saw.
All aboard! L&N through car service to Gull Point, Avalon, Park, Gulf City, Milton, and Bayou Siding. Be sure to visit the T.R. Miller Mill Company, engine number 12, through these doors. Board.
T.R. Miller engine, 1906 built steam locomotive, presented to museum. L&N caboose number 226, wooden cupola type, built around 1915. They restored this caboose after heavy fire damage in 1987. Two-truck flatbed car was built by T.R. Miller Mill Company in 1930. Used in logging and turpentine operations till 1940. The engine itself, built in 1904, well, difference in timeline, it said 1906, it says 1904. But in 1921, sold to the DeBarleton Coal Corporation. And then eventually, T.R. Miller Company got the engine, served 30 years in the sawmill yard before being sold to the historic Pensacola Preservation Board. Pretty cool. Get a nice close-up view of this thing. Look at the rest of the train here. Let's see, we got our flat car right here. Unfortunately, we can't go in the caboose. But yep, big caboose. Gonna go back inside and continue on with the rest of the tour of the Museum of Industry. Obviously, railroads played an important part in the industry and commerce in Pensacola and surrounding areas, moving all kinds of goods and people. In 1834, 210-mile Florida-Alabama-Georgia Railroad was proposed to link Pensacola with Columbus, Georgia, the head of navigation on the Chattahoochee River. Interesting. By 1870, Pensacola was connected by a rail to the north with the north, and the system was incorporated into the Louisville and Nashville Railroad in 1880. Obviously, working on a railroad was harsh work, laying track. They didn't have a lot of the machinery that we have today to do that type of work, so yep, backbreaking work. Some more gadgets here, artifacts and whatnot. Got a steam locomotive bell right here. Now we move along to the lumber industry. Obviously, as stated before, with the live oaks being used in shipbuilding, lumber was an important ware to be traded. Live oak, yellow pine, and cypress lumber. Got an old tractor right here, a tractor. More tools right here. Kind of dig this tractor though. Pretty cool. A lot of the lumber was used for shipbuilding. Like a lot of these companies back then, employees were paid with tokens or tickets or coins instead of actual cash, which was used in company stores. I'm sure the companies didn't gouge on the prices of goods. Also, another byproduct of the lumber industry, especially with pine wood, is making turpentine. The resins from pine wood being distilled for making turpentine. Looking at some machinery we got here. A lathe machine for cutting fence pickets, broom handles, and lathe strips for construction. Next machine, molder, used for producing tongue and groove flooring. All types of wood milling equipment. And this piece of equipment right here, a planer, used for smoothing the rough lumber or reducing the thickness of a board. Over here we have a saw blade sharpener because, well, you need to maintain the tools that are making the wood. This big power plant right here, 2-cylinder Worthington diesel engine, powering the mills, machinery and everything. Had a generator attached to this diesel engine. And apparently this generator provided the power for the town of Crestview, Florida from 1922 to 34. Huh. This thing here, a swage, Kinney swage, for manipulating cold metal. It says it's a saw set for the use on large circular saws. Another one of the many sawmill machines. Then we have a backup generator power plant right here. This one's a one-cylinder Fairbanks Morse diesel engine. Pretty cool. And from this angle right here, we have a roller bed cutoff saw, which was used to cut the lumber into the different lengths required, as you can see right here. Get a good little aerial view of the machinery right here. Got a couple more pieces of equipment we'll get to in a second. Well, little equipment right here, a log cart and carriage, pretty self-explanatory. Bringing in the logs to the sawmill for processing. Over here we got a head saw. Moving the logs up and down through here in order to start chopping them up into dimensional lumber, or at least get it started. As you can see, edger, the rough cut boards were fed through here to be smooth and cut into uniform widths like 2x4s. And right here we just have a simple scale. Baggage was weighed, I guess, for the people that were working at the mills. Little factoid, between 1875 and 95, 4.1 billion feet of lumber valued at $50 million left Pensacola through the port. A lot of lumber. And some more tools, old tools here. Another little fact, from 1883 to 84, 479 vessels passed through Pensacola's port, taking with them rosin, turpentine, flour, tobacco, coal, iron, and shingles. $1886 dollar value of exported cargo was $2.1 million. 1910, it was $22.5 million. Also, to amend that last statement, they also obviously exported lumber, barrel staves, grain, cotton, and phosphates or fertilizer. Well, that concludes the Museum of Industry, so we're going to continue moving on in our little historic Pensacola tour. Now we are entering the Julie Cottage. The Julie Cottage. Let's see here. She was actually a free black woman that owned property in Pensacola in the early days of America. As we could see, it's undergone some restoration. A lot of little artifacts that were found on site. Little interesting fact, there was a fort called Fort Negro that was actually manned by free blacks, Seminoles, Choctaws, and slaves in order to helped keep control over Pensacola and keep the Spanish from taking it over, taking over the area, but a lucky shot from a heated cannonball hit the powder magazine and blew the place up. So apparently over 270 of the fort's 300 inhabitants were killed in that. Of course, slavery touched this area just as much as everywhere else in early America. Apparently during the Civil War, before the Confederates abandoned the area in 1862, during the Civil War, they pretty much destroyed everything and evacuated everybody save for maybe 82 people, according to this. And 72 whites, 10 black, 6 were slaves, and 4 were free. Interesting. During 1877, Reconstruction after the Civil War ended on account of Rutherford B. Hayes making a deal with Southern Democrats to get their electoral votes to become president. He ended Reconstruction. Of course, you had a number of individuals, black individuals, that played a role in politics in Florida. Josiah T. Walls from Virginia. He was in the Florida State Legislature. Thomas D. Tucker, born in Sierra Leone and came to the U.S. as a young man. Practiced law in Pensacola. Lucy Ann Caldwell Elijah, mixed English, African, and Cherokee. Active in education and community service. Zebulon Elijah, postmaster. Jonathan C. Gibbs, Secretary of State. John Sunday Jr. He actually held political office during Reconstruction. Moving through the Julie Cottage, we have the bedroom area right here. You literally slept under a mosquito net every night because you had to have the windows open for ventilation. During the Spanish occupation of this area, they actually had a class system or a caste system for racial groups where you had Negroes, mulattoes, and Julie Panton, which the house is named after. She was a chandler, baker, and free woman of color. She bought the house and provided a home to 2 formerly enslaved women, Angelica and Rosalia Bonifay. They were able to earn and purchase their freedom, eventually allowing them to move on with their lives. Now, even though people of color that were called free existed, they really weren't free, because at some point they were forced to have to pay a tax in order to remain free or be forced into slavery. And then at one point, the state passed a law requiring each free person of color to have a white guardian. Wow. So even if you were free, you could have been pressed back into slavery by force if you didn't pay a tax. And of course, we already know how Jim Crow played out. Of course, Jim Crow caused problems even within black communities, as Creoles and mulattoes who were light enough in tone were able to capitalize on that. But this cottage was relocated in '77 to this area where it stands right now, and restored, of course. Right here we have our living room, or as they would have otherwise called it, a drawing room, but it was still an area where family would gather for normal activities or just to hang out, because with the small size of the house, well, you had to capitalize on space. So you got your normal layout: couches, chairs, tables, bookshelf, fireplace. I actually like it. Nice little house. The area where we came in at over here would have been the kitchen area. But we're gonna continue moving along. Right here we have Manuel Barrios Cottage. Let's check out this place. If I come in the right door. In this house we have an exhibit covering the USO and the recruitment effort for World War II. Had a victory book drive. Local USOs held dances for boosting morale among soldiers. Swing dancing. An old radio, Philco radio. If you didn't handwrite stuff, you did it on a typewriter. But yep, a lot of communication between soldiers and family back home, and it went through simple, tight mail system because, well, even with communication, you had to keep quiet about a lot of stuff. There was no radio traffic that could just fly around.
This house was built in 1805 and it's built using Mortise and Tenon construction. Mortise and Tenon is a hole in the pin, and you can see it up here in the corner. And those of you that are standing right here in front of the fireplace, if you look up, you can see the pin sticking out of the rafter. See right above on the side of the chimney, you can see the pin on the side of the rafter. So the main part, the wooden part of the house, is just pinned together. You can also see it in that window. You see where you're standing? And if you look about 10 inches from the left-hand side, it's the first part that we have here for the parents. You're familiar with the rope bed? Well, evidently you are, right? Since you came here, so you know how this works. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So for those of you who don't, so there's a rope, and this is the key, and they would tighten the rope, and you go down and tighten up all the ropes and pull the knot at the end, so it'll be a comfortable place for the parents to sleep. This is 3/4 size. So don't think this is the size of the bed that they would do. This is 3/4 size. Mattresses would be filled with whatever they could put their hands on. Spanish moss, feathers, leaves, hay, whatever they could get, they would fill the mattresses. Children mattresses would be made the same way. They would be sleeping on the floor, and wherever it was convenient, like last night they might be sleeping outside. February they might be trying to see the wind from coming in. Notice the cheesecloth or the mosquito netting hanging everywhere, because at that time of the year, that's how they controlled the mosquitoes. You would sleep under mosquito netting. Everybody would be sleeping under mosquito netting. An 1/8 of an inch wide, 1/4 of an inch wide, big, huge. You stick it together with molasses. So it would be a tower about 3 foot tall. The lady of the house would go to the market and get some sugar and bring it to the house, probably lock it in the garde manger right there, and then use the sugar for different things. And one of the things that she would do, and if she needed to use the sugar, she would take her sugar mallet, just to see the pick, knock some of the sugar off, put it in a mortar and pestle, granulate it, so she had to do every step of every job to put food on the table for her family. So she would granulate that sugar. One of the things that she would use that sugar for is that they would make their own wine, beer, and whiskey. Because it just wasn't sold at the market, so they would make their own wine, beer, and whiskey. And this is used for making wine. So she would take some of the sugar and she would save her wine bottles year to year, line up the wine bottles, put some of that sugar in the wine bottles with the fruit that they either grew or collected, and then put cheesecloth on top of this and dip water from a water source to dribble them into the water bottles and cork each bottle. You get a different vintage in each bottle, and you get one of two things. Actually, you get one of two things in each bottle. You either get wine or you get vinegar. And she needed both, so it didn't make any difference what she got. She needed the vinegar also because vinegar is, preparation of foods, preservation of foods, medicinal purposes. Hanging over the table also. It would hang over the table low enough for her to get to the bread and everything. Very important for her to do that. Do y'all remember why it's important to do that? Rats and mice. That way they could see the rats and the mice climbing on that item. Maybe it would be moving or something. They could knock the rats and the mice off. Now, at nighttime, a little food in that, put that out. Then in the morning, it would be the job of one of the young misters of the household to take that down to the water's edge, drown the animals. Ships that came here would sell their old sails, and people would buy them to put on the floor to keep the floor clean. Table in the middle of the floor. When it was time to eat, the lady of the house would take her rag. She would just wipe the top of the table off onto this. She put the pot in the middle of the table. They'd stand up around the table to eat. Now imagine people standing around the table dumping that food into the floor. Well, with this, you just kind of sweep it up, throw it out the door. If it was a wooden floor, that's a brush with a bucket, hands and knees, trying to scrub the floor. Getting it out of the floor, you would have to do that. Yep. Back room in the other room. Okay. Then I'll meet you on the other side.
All right. Got another walkthrough through the other half, the other portion, the other apartment, because this is a duplex. Got another rug right here, sail rug. It's pretty cool. Nice. We are going to church.
So the church was built in 1832. Now, the other day, they give you some of the history of Pensacola. I'm going to go over a little bit of it, just because I'll give you a little bit more information. So, this is the little claim for Spain back in 1559, if I ever say that. He claimed a lot of land for the King of Spain. So the Gulf of Mexico is there. So my back to the Gulf of Mexico, think about a map of the United States, especially the southern states, Mississippi River, Atlantic Ocean. So he claimed from the Mississippi River all the way across the Gulf South to the Atlantic Ocean, part of Louisiana, all of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, part of Tennessee, South Carolina, and of course the state of Florida. So that was a lot of land that the claim for the King of Spain, and so he wanted to make sure that he had a presence here. That's why he sent Tristan to London in 1559 with the 11 ships to form the settlement. And she posed out of hurricanes that came through, and after a couple of years, they decided to go back where they came from. It took 150 years before Spain finally did send more people here, but in 1719, Spain was at war with France, and they were losing, and they had to give up some land, so they gave up Florida. 3 years later, the same war is going on. Now Spain is winning, so they got Florida back, and kept Florida until 1763. 1763 was the first Treaty of Paris. I think you studied the treaties of Paris either in 5th grade or 7th grade. Do you remember? Don't let me feel bad, let me do it. Spain was at war with Great Britain, and they were losing, and they had to give up some land. So, the King of Spain gave up Florida. Britain was here for 20 years until 1783. You heard the lady say what happened with the Second Treaty of Paris was that it ended the Revolutionary War. We became a nation in 1783. We had the Declaration of Independence in 1770. When they collected the $4,500 to build this church, that coin could have been in the basket when they passed the basket when they collected the money for that. So that's the kind of what the coinage would have looked. So they dug them up, took whatever they wanted and buried them back down in there. See the whitewashed wall from 1879. You can go through this door, turn around and look up, and you'll see the white.
3 different reverends were actually buried at this spot, essentially under the church.
Wednesday of every normal school month at noon.
Where I'm standing right now is the original wall, but the church was extended later on. So these graves are still underneath.
When they originally put that part in, they put a 5 floor in, so when they did the rejuvenation
got our office right here.
The sycamores are pretty big tree, and that's one of the great trees mentioned in the New Testament, in olive and all. But evidently it's also. Well, we'll be out. We walk down Zaragoza, turn the corner, come here. And so that house is not open to the public, but you can walk in. So this is what she built. This house has 5 jib doors in it. You can see these windows on the bottom floor and the 3 across the front are all jib doors. And I'm going to explain that when I go to the inside of the house. I'm holding the door open for you to walk in. Of course, y'all are going to be able to see the bottom floor, so it's going to be decorated. People walking on the street can see inside. Now notice I call it a parlor, not a living room, because there's a difference between the two. Okay, notice we have a lot of furniture in the middle of the room. That's the way that they would have decorated a parlor. So if you look, you see the hinges, and over there, the hinges. So the bottom part opens up to the inside of the house, and the bottom sash of the window rises and is equal to the top sash, so that you can step out onto the porch to catch a breath of fresh air. I'm sure you've heard that before. You cannot leave the house that way. That's a social faux pas. You don't do that. If you need to leave the house, you have to go find your hostess, let her escort you to the front door so you can pick up your items from off the hall tree, and then she would show you the door. So that's the way that would happen. This mirror is from the door house in Baghdad. It's a door family item, and it's a pier mirror, built just like a boat pier. And I think that Clara would use this mirror. If she was having a soiree, she might step in front of this mirror to check herself, just to make sure she was perfect. Fanciful leaves on it and everything. Look at the table in the corner right there. See all that carvings of those legs? All that frou-frou stuff on those legs? That's Charles Eastlake style of furnishings. Look at this table. Kind of plain, big legs. This is Empire or Napoleonic style of furnishings. That's the 2 different styles. Empire and Charles Eastlake.
They look so pretty.
They are pretty, yes, they are. All the fireplaces in the house are coal-burning fireplaces. So coal was available from the ships that would come to port. And coal burns longer, hotter, and cleaner than wood does, so it's a step up from wood. So she's showing off by burning coal. A basket would sit on the ears right here to light the coal. And if this is a solid slate fireplace surround, it's mimicked in the dining room. It's a catalog item, but it's okay. So she got this, and the slate picks up the heat from the coal basket to radiate it around the room. This is an etagere or a whatnot shelf. So you have items on here to spur conversation. Clara's not missing a beat. She's showing off at every step. Notice that she has one of the doors of her china cabinet kind of open a little bit, so you can see that she has all 12 place settings of the china. They're not here. They're in the Lear house. We're using it in the Lear house also, so you'll see this again in the Lear house. But china sets, like this very small dish right here. Does anybody have an idea? Very small. This is for butter. You would get your own butter pat, and if the family had a crest, it more than likely would have the crest in it. Right? And this strange looking dish right here, this is a bone plate. So you would be served your dinner on the bone, like a chicken leg, pork chop, fish on the bone. Social etiquette is you remove the meat from the bone. You have to remove the bone from the plate. So you have a bone plate to put those bones in to get them off of your plate, so you don't choke on those bones. What about the little glass dish? See this? Salt. You get your own little thing of salt.
What's the tiny spoon?
Excuse me?
There's a tiny little spoon.
It has a spoon. That's a salt spoon. There would probably be a pepper grinder on the table also, or on the sideboard or something like that. Now, the table is set for the family to eat. And I know that because if you look at the napkin rings, the napkin rings are different. They're not the same. If it was a party, all the napkin rings would be the same, right? But family sitting here, you would have your own napkin ring to sit at table, because that napkin ring would have your napkin in it, and they only washed clothes once a week.
Right here. Oh my gosh. It's like,
Probably 100% from the same family. Now, became bankers here in New Orleans, Pensacola. Poor hawk right here passing away, pouring it into a cup to drink it. So that's why the cups are so very small, because it was very expensive and you would only get a little bit. So they're not Demi-Tasse cups, they're actually chocolate cups, but you would only get a little bit. You can get chocolate services now, but they would have a big, like we normally see. You have to have a chocolate service, or you could have a chocolate service also.
I think they ghosted. That's the way they lived. They did not have matching furniture in the bedroom. Well, the lady of the house would, the parents would, but the others would not. This is a pre-Civil War bed. This bed is a slat bed, so it wasn't wasn't rope. It wasn't just a piece of wood. It's wooden slats. Downstairs from the kitchen, bring it up here to bathe. You sit in the to bathe, probably then just threw the water out the window.
Oh, wow. It's a small waist for like a lady.
They would have worn those during the day, taken them off at night, rinsed them out, put them on a towel horse to dry, and then worn them the next day. They would wear them for the 7 days until it was time to wash, to change their clothes. So, y'all have one of these or multiples of these? No one? None of you do? Do you know what it is? To make it bigger. Okay? Now, let me give you another. One of the children maybe was sick. She could put the sick child in here, but he would have expected that. And then he would sing to them, and he would have been brought up the back.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
Why didn't they do today back then?
They just didn't have.
Because they just didn't have the technology to do it.
Yeah, they didn't have.
To show you. This is one type this is a silver certificate from 1899. So they did have the other silver certificates with Washington on them, but this is called a Black Eagle silver certificate. And so you could actually take this, well, any silver certificate at the time, you could take it to 1836. She died in 1901. So this would have been right at that time. And so we're going to see things that begin with the last name of Runyon. He had a watercolor school here in Pensacola. Very a well-known family still. That was 1871. 1890. Right at the turn of the century.
Oh, mommy. Mommy. Yeah, there's clips.
Now, as the living room, notice that there's more furniture pushed to the sides, even though we have this stuff sitting in the center of the room, which you asked us. 1900 federal Jim Crow laws came into effect, though, and that did change things for members of our society. They had to live in their own sections of the city. They had to have their own doors to, like, a doctor's office or to a theater. They had to have their own churches and restaurants, things like that. So things did change for members of our society. And Pensacola came more in line with other cities of the South. Another thing is they started hearing the same music that other cities were listening to, and also seeing movies, because silent films came out, and they were seeing the same films as other cities of the South were seeing. So
Fake food.
no, only the very rich, very elite would have had a dining room. After that, most homes weren't to make clothes for the children. The picture above the mantle is of the tugboat Monarch, the captain's tugboat. One of the other things that he had to go to the beach, go swimming, whatever it was, and so he built a pier and a pavilion at Santa Rosa Pavilion where he sold his cold drinks and his food and all that kind of stuff. But hey, you got to make money somehow, right? You got to do it. Now,
Even if it is modernized.
I know, especially when you let somebody hear the dial tone, they're going, "What?
Yeah.
This is a rug sweeper." Do you? And how many years? Because when I was growing up, everything had to be pressed. There was no was that you were pressing had to be pressed. Boy, so the ironing board stayed up all the time, and there was always a basket of clothes to be ironed. Everything was just
I just stepped into the kitchen. The line just out to the Gulf, you had to actually hook it up to the sewage system. But now they have the butler's pantry, but notice what else is missing in this room. Counter space. Where's the counter space? Now that drawer of the Hoosier cabinet pulls out and they have the table. But even with, imagine a household of 7 people, because they had, the Rochblads had 5 children and the husband, the mother and father, so that's 7 people. I mean, counter space, cooking something for 7 people, I don't know how they did it. This room was used as the Rochblads and the hallway right there, kind of separate the private sector of the home to the, because I would imagine, of course, this set here in the hallway to show that they were Catholic. And we do have pictures of the Rochblad family here in the hallway. My parents had the claws and the grandchildren. Visitors about 5 months ago, 2 men that were Rochblad descendants, and they were like either 2 cousins that were kind of apart in age, or maybe an uncle and a nephew. They came and they wanted to see that picture because they said, well, Uncle Jim looks just like the captain. And so they wanted to see that picture to see what it looked like. Go back. This is pretty new. So they have rooms set up for both. The suffrage movement started in about 1830, and the suffrage movement, women had to work state by state to get women the right to vote, because voting is a state.
Welcome to the speakeasy.
Oh my gosh. The fake people scared me for a second.
So as I mentioned, you needed to trust who was making the alcohol for you. And alcohol takes a long process to make. Farmers usually were the ones who made alcohol because they already had the grain and they wanted to make as much money as they could with that grain. So you have to take the grain and you soak it in water and boil it at 98 degrees for a certain period of time. Then make the alcohol. So you have to use copper. When it comes out of the mash and you condense it down, it comes out in 1925. The Sanger Company came in and built a theater here in Pensacola, the Sanger Theater that's still being used today. There were films back even in the 1880s, but they were short, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes long. The problem was that the media... Any questions about anything? Because we're going to go downstairs and look at the jib door. This house has, well now you know it has 7 jib doors in it. Usually I say it only has 6. We're going downstairs. Weight in the casing. Big weight in the casing tied to the rope. And so the bottom sash would rise and it goes into it.
I really enjoyed it. Thank
Feel
you.
free. Good. And don't forget that history report that you can write.
Now we're inside the Museum of Commerce. So get to do a little walk around, see what this place has got. We got some guys making 3D printed artifacts, it looks like. Horse-drawn carriages.
Yeah, if he hadn't been on the other side.
The area is made up like a old commercial area with the storefronts and all. Wooden boardwalks. That's the bathroom right there. But going on the boardwalk, we have our barber shop, which, as you can see, quaint little setup. Got all the razors and other implements there displayed. Sink. Got the wood burning stove and a spot to wash in the corner there. Harness shop, leather and harness shop for making all the hardware for your horses. Let me zoom in there. Get a better shot of all of that. I think your saddles and Other hardware, we got a piece of equipment in the background. Let me zoom in on that.
Did you see all the dolls in that store?
There we go. The actual shop that this is modeled from was in Pensacola from the 20s through the mid 40s. A.M. Avery Hardware, Steamboat Supplies, Oils, Tinware, House Furnishing Goods. Basically a hardware store. A.M. Avery, born in 1852, died in 1920. Joined his father's retail hardware store business as a partner in 1877, and after the father retired, became sole owner in 89. This was almost kind of like a little bit of a Walmart to a degree. Had all kinds of stuff. There we go. Get a better view of everything on the back wall. Water keg with a faucet. Has a little motorized pump on it. The Clutter Music House. Pianos, organs, sheet music, and instruments. Catch a look at that inside. Let me zoom in. There we go.
We can throw them towards.
We'll put them back in the green room. The artists will love it.
I'll just put them right now back there by the.
John M. Clutter, born in Pennsylvania in 1847, established the store in the early 1890s. And of course, the music hall was located above this store. Business was continued after his death by his sons until 1923. A little piano right there. Well, not a little one, but continuation of that little nook. Model this area as a carriage repair shop. Another little wagon here for, not sure what that would be. No placard on that. If anybody knows what this carriage was for, let us know. Got another little workshop in here. Laser etching. The Pensacola Journal, news and job printing. Basically a newspaper. Pensacola's first traffic light, 1926. Has this little clockwork mechanism right here for cycling the lights. Pretty interesting. Instead of PLCs, it was just a simple motorized clockwork mechanism. Fixed time all the time. That's actually pretty cool. Got a model of a gas station right here. The old gas pumps, simple little house.
I'm Jenny, turn that stack around.
Leaded gas. Next stop is the streetcar. Has a little level of class, old world style. Wood and metal. But wait, there's more. We missed a spot. Right over here. John F. Pfeiffer, toys, breads, cakes, pies, confectioners. Huh, that's pretty cool. Little kids' toys and stuff. Kind of like those old Viking ships and galleys. Models. Has some creepy dolls and busts. Right there. Oh, doll right there. Scary looking dolls. Little scooter. It's pretty cool. John F. Pfeiffer, native of Bavaria, operated one of the first bakeries in Pensacola in 1869, then built a store a year later at this address right here. Ground floor had a toy shop and the bakery was in the back. And of course, living quarters were on the second floor. The family business continued till 1964. That concludes our walkthrough of the Museum of Commerce. We're going to move along. Walking to our last stop, we passed by this rolling billboard for a restaurant. It's an old car. Horseless carriage. Walking down one of the streets here, they got it all decked out in a old world vibe with this architecture. Gas lights. It's pretty cool. Voices of Pensacola. This is where we're going. Inside we have us a letterpress. Quick machine for producing small stationery cards and the like. Well, apparently you have a jazz scene in Pensacola. Began in the 20th century. Black musicians in New Orleans developed a new sound known as jazz. Ladies were free, the dudes had to pay. Of course, jazz had its roots in blues, originating in New Orleans, well, in Louisiana, but New York nightclubs were popular to play jazz musicians. Of course, as jazz became even more popular, Pensacola was a notable stop on the touring circuit. Performed from the 20s to the 60s. In the 50s and 60s, bands like Bourbon Street Six entertained quite a bit. Eventually in '82, a newly formed radio station got together and organized the Jazz Society of Pensacola. Of course, this little exhibit right here is showing little testimonies based on stuff that different people brought with them when they traveled to this city. Different ethnicities. This was and still is a diverse place. And obviously with the military base, a whole lot of different people came through here. They actually have a quadricentennial celebration, 400 years since Tristan da Luna arrived in Pensacola back in 1559. It's a reproduction of what those individuals would have worn back then. The breastplate and the jacket right there. And over here we have different postcards and pictures and different stuff posted from people that were in the area. All kinds of history just in these little postcards and posters and the like. Pages from magazines and articles. There's some more right here. Of course, Jim Crow touched Pensacola just like it did every other area through the South. A lot of diversity, a lot of history. Here we have some more postcards, pictures, and the like.
Well, see, I can just like talk your ear off. That's fine. But yeah, should you ever, before you make a mistake like that, just write down what the numbers are.
This ark, a religious cabinet, held the Torah scrolls of the Congregation of B'nai Israel Synagogue. Formed in 1899, it is currently located at that address right there. Well, that pretty much concludes our little quick walkthrough of Voices of Pensacola. Well, we're pretty much done with our playing tourists, so yep. Well, get a quick look at this placard right here, and that will conclude our little tour. So, as usual, like, subscribe, notifications, all that good stuff. We're gonna get ready to hit the road. Time to go. We'll catch you later. We're out.